Hey guys, before the video starts, I just wanted to let you know today's video is going to be a lot more detailed than most of my other ones, so for that reason it's going to be a bit longer. The reason I'm doing this is because I've had a lot of requests from people who are actually trying to make the rings, so this way I'll be able to fit in a lot more tips and tricks and stuff that doesn't make the ring creation process that much more interesting, but it's all stuff that will be very helpful if you're trying to make this ring, especially if you haven't worked with some of these materials like carbon fiber before. So this isn't going to be something I do in most of my videos. I want to make sure they're as entertaining as possible, and let me know if you'd be interested in me posting these videos elsewhere. So for example, I could post a 10-minute video showing how to make the ring on YouTube, but then on Patreon I could post a 30-minute video going over the same thing, and it'd just be a lot more in depth. So that's all I've got to say. Feel free to put the video at 2x speed if this is a bit long for you, and let's go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're going to be making a carbon fiber glowstone ring today. It's going to be pretty intricate and I think it's going to turn out really nicely. So I'm excited to get started on it. But first I just wanted to mention we just got these t-shirts in stock. So if you want to check those out, they're on our supplies website. We're going to make them pretty cheap. We're not really trying to make a profit on them. I've said this in a previous video, but we're just trying to get these to our fans who want them. So we're not trying to make money off of them. So the link to that is down in the description. But anyways, for the ring, like I said, it's going to be carbon fiber. So we're going to start with some of these carbon fiber plates. We'll have these on our supplies website really soon, by the way. And we'll be using this. We'll need to use 2 halves of it in order to form the design that we want. I'll explain why we need to do that when we get to that step. And it has to do with the fact that we're adding a copper stripe to it. So I've got these copper washers here, and these are just kind of a good starting point. So I had these made. These just kind of make it a little bit faster to do all the different sizes. So there's less drilling and hollowing out to do. So I'll probably start with a washer about this size and then hollow it out a little bit more with the Dremel until it fits just right and has the dimensions that we need. So this is going to be a glowstone ring, so we're going to be using some glow powders. This will be interesting because the customer who ordered this ring, they want it to glow red but look blue in the daytime. So it's going to do a color shift between light and dark, so that'll be interesting. And then our inlay materials, we're doing uncut diamonds, meteorite, and amethyst. So I'm just going to grab, I kind of wanted to show you the whole process that I go through. So I need to look for the diamonds. Those are here, so we just got a bag. These are uncut diamonds. We inlay these. These make the process of inlaying a bit more tricky, so they're kind of a pain, but the results I think are worth it. And then the meteorite we've got bagged up here. We just have a few more, but this will definitely be enough for the ring we're doing. And then for the glow, the way we do that, we've got all our glow powders down here. So here's our red glow, and then we need to color it blue. So in here we've just got a bunch of vials and they all just have pigment into it, and they're just kind of like ready to go kits. And so whatever color you need, you just grab that. So we want blue. I'll add glow powder to this, shake it up, and we'll be good to go there. And I was going to explain how we do the meteorite a little bit more. The way we do it, we take our big, we've actually got, I'll show you over here. So we've got these big leftover slabs here, and then the way we do it is we use this bandsaw here. We cut off slabs that are pretty thin but thick enough so that we can have a good amount of material there, and we take it over to this rolling press here, and we just put them through here, and it takes forever because the iron is not really meant to be flattened. This is like for jewelry. You usually use softer metals in that are already a lot thinner. So it's not the most graceful of processes, but you can see we go from pieces, I mean this isn't to scale, but this piece was probably twice as long and started from a piece about this big. So you can see we flatten them and they get quite a bit longer and then just smoothed out. And we have them thin enough that we can rip them apart using various methods. So that's how we get those pieces down to size so that we can inlay them into our rings. And the reason I want to go over that process is I had a few questions about the meteorite on our supplies website. It's one of the most expensive materials, even more expensive than like the gold leaf or the uncut diamonds, for example. And the reason is there's just so much labor that goes into getting it down to the size we want. And so we're considering selling bigger scraps that you can do yourself at home. You can use a blowtorch and a hammer to flatten them. And then finally, I wanted to show you the process we take for the amethyst. And so I think it's kind of interesting. That's why I'm sharing it with you guys. So this is kind of our bin, one of the bins of our raw materials. So I've got a big piece of amethyst here. So what we do is we take it, and I've got, these are just 2 pipes, and then I put the amethyst down in here and then just crush it. So we just pound that a few times, and then what we've got here, this is meant for a lot of rock hunters or people, I think, sifting through streams for gold or other minerals. So we take our tube that has the crushed amethyst in there, and then we pour it down in here. And then there's 3 levels of filtering that it goes through. This top level, this is all pieces that are too big to use. So you can see we've got all these big ones, and then we can grab a couple of the larger ones, throw them back in the pipe, crush it again. Usually do this on the cement surface because that's obviously super loud. And then pour out all of the crumbs. And then yeah, we can obviously repeat this process all that we want. Sift it all out, and then on this level, these are the medium-sized pieces. And then the level below that, these are the fine pieces. So only these 2 levels, so the fine and the medium, those are the ones we actually use in inlays. The other is either too small or too big. So you can see we've got a bunch of this dust down here. I'm trying to think of good creative ways to utilize this. We might be able to cast it in resin. I think that might end up having some really cool results. So I'll probably experiment with that, but for now we're just storing it up in a big bag. So what I do is I take this, and then we usually put it into a bigger bag, but for now I'm just gonna grab, this will be just for this ring that we're doing. I'll grab a pinch of the small pieces, and then a pinch of the medium ones. Grab a couple. So now this will give us plenty of variety to put all the different pieces that we want in this ring. And then finally for the glow powder, I'll show you how we mix it. Let me just get this out of the way first, actually. So we've got our blue pigment in here. We just need to add red glow powder. Usually try to use a funnel, but I'm just doing it quick and sloppy right now. And then just shake that up. You can see I haven't mixed it completely thoroughly, but this just gives you the idea. I'll do a little bit more work on it off camera, but hopefully that gives you the idea of how exactly we do it. So we do have everything together, and it seems like it's gonna be a pretty straightforward process from here, but this will take between 8 to 10 hours is what it usually takes me to do a ring like this. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So step 1, we need to cut out 2 ring blanks out of this carbon fiber, and we're going to be using these diamond coated hole saws for this. The reason I use the diamond coated hole saws is because they're abrasive. Anything else will just tear it up, so if you're trying to use a wood saw, it'll just completely destroy that carbon fiber, and it'll probably overheat it, and that's something you definitely don't want to do. That's why you see me squirting water at it. That's to keep the temperature down. If it gets too hot to touch, that's when you risk burning that resin, and that will make the ring fall apart. And the reason we need to use 2 pieces for this ring is because we're adding this copper inlay to it, and that'll be more apparent in a second, but we basically need to shape these 2 halves to fit together around that copper washer. And on the drill press, I was able to keep everything completely wet. That way there wasn't any dust coming out of it. That's another reason why I like to use water on there. But for these next steps, I'm not going to be using water, so there's going to be a dust issue. Always wear a dust mask if you're around carbon fiber. The reason for that is that the carbon won't actually break down in your lungs, so it just stays in there forever. And so that's obviously a very bad thing.
Stop filming me.
So my first step, I'm putting these in the chuck on my lathe, and I'm hollowing out the inside just a little bit. The reason for this is because I want to give them a perfectly concentric and all new surface in there. So the hole saws that I cut this out with are not very accurate. So the 2 circles that we use, they might be off by a little bit. And the hole is actually slightly larger at the top than it is at the bottom. That's because it's been rubbing on it the whole entire time as I'm cutting through the material. So now the inside of these blanks are perfectly circular, and they'll fit on our expanding ring mandrels a lot better. And next we'll need to do the shaping of it. So you can see here I've got a sketch with all of my dimensions, and these are all the shaping we need to do on these carbon fiber pieces. We need to make 2 identical halves, and these are the 3 diameters we need. So we need 21.5 millimeters for the inside. That's going to be the actual ring size. And then 24 millimeters, that will be where that copper piece fits on, as well as where we do the inlaying. And then the actual outer diameter of this is going to be 27.5 millimeters. So this will give us a ring that's perfectly durable, but not too thick so that it's uncomfortable comfortable to wear. And so you can see the reason why we need these two halves to come together is so that we can slide the washer on and then glue it all together. Otherwise we'd have to cut the copper and try to inlay it there, and that's just never ever as durable or as concentric or anything like that. So this is the best way to do that. And now we're ready to put the carbon fiber blanks on the ring mandrels. And if you didn't know, I sell these ring mandrels on my supplies website. There's a link to that down in the description. Now it's time to get going on the actual shaping of the two halves. So the first step I'll take in that is trimming the outer diameter of the ring. That'll give me an all new surface to work off of, and it'll be perfectly concentric with the inside diameter of the ring. And we're ready to start shaping the groove on here. And this is a step that you have to be very careful on. This is where you can crack your carbon fiber. So I'm being very gentle with my lathe. I'm not removing much material. And you can see the inner diameter. I actually planned this out. I used a really small hole saw to begin with. That way we've got a whole lot of carbon fiber beneath us. That way this ring is still really thick even though we're trimming it down here. And then what we'll do after we shape it is we'll use more gentle methods of shaving it down. So I'll actually use a Dremel to get that inner diameter where we want that. And that's actually, and if you're making a ring like this and you run into issues where there's cracking or anything like that, it usually happens right here. So you really do want to be careful. And you'll see when I'm done, I pour some very thin super glue on here. This actually absorbs into the carbon fiber and strengthens it just a little bit. That way this ring can be as strong as possible. So we've got our two halves ready. You can see one of them has a bigger groove than the other one. This doesn't really matter, but it is wider overall than I want, so I'm putting it back on the lathe and measuring it out to get the exact dimensions that we want. So you can see now the two halves are fitting together nicely, and now we're ready to add the copper to it. So I've got this washer. I picked the one that fits as close as possible, but we still need to hollow it out a little bit. And I'll be using a Dremel for this, and you can see I'm using a ceramic bit for this, and so this is really good for softer metals, things like this that can get kind of gummy. This is able to cleanly tear away the bits of the metal, and it doesn't get gummed up and you don't need to replace it very often. But it's also a very small diameter, so it can make this step challenging, because if you leave the Dremel running in one certain spot on accident for too long, it can kind of make your circle lopsided. So you'll see me switch to the larger diameter Dremel sanding bit, and I use that to round the whole thing out, make it a little bit more circular. And then you can see on this sketch here, the carbon fiber pieces actually have a bit of a shoulder to them here. So if you make the copper just big enough to fit over the carbon fiber, it might not touch all the way against that back wall. And there's two ways to avoid this. We could either use our lathe bit to cut into the carbon fiber more, but like I was saying earlier, we really don't want this to crack, and that causes cracks almost every single time I try it. So I really try to avoid doing that. And so what we're going to be doing is I'm going to hollow out the copper just a little bit more. That way it can fit over that shoulder. Now before we glue it all together, I'm going to rough up the surface of the copper. That'll make the glue adhere to it just a little bit better. And then I'll carefully put just enough glue on here to get a good seal all around. But I don't want a bunch of it to squeeze out because that can make a mess. Then you can see I'm using this diamond hole saw to give a nice even pressure around it, make sure it's firmly planted around everywhere. And if there's too much glue, it's going to get stuck to that, and we might end up tearing the copper piece off with our diamond hole saw, so that'd be really bad. So now we're ready to glue the two halves of carbon fiber together, and at this step I always go back, look over my notes, make sure we've got everything exactly how we want it, because there really is no going back at this point. But once I make sure I've got everything correct, for example, we only want one copper stripe instead of two, we're ready to glue them together. And this is another really important step of this whole process. If you do it wrong, the ring might be a little bit lopsided, so that's never good. So you want to make sure to be very careful when you align this, and then to apply a very even pressure to it. So I'm using an arbor press for this. Now that our two halves are combined, it's time to start doing a little bit more shaping. So you can tell that this is obviously way thicker than we need it. So I'm going to carefully trim down each side, get it a little bit closer to the final dimensions that we want. I am still leaving a little bit of room for safety here though. And you can see I readjust the placement of the ring on the ring mandrel. That's because right now the inside of the ring isn't perfectly circular. So I have to do a little bit of tweaking by hand to make sure that we've got the ring aligned how we want it. And you can see in the video it still is a little out of whack. I ended up doing a lot more adjustments off camera, but the steps were just the same, just manually tweaking things by hand, adjusting everything that I could until I got the ring even how I wanted it. Now we're ready to start hollowing the ring out a little bit more. Like I said earlier, we did leave this quite a bit larger than we needed it to, and that's just for added strength. So at first I'll be using a boring bar. This will make sure everything's even on the ring, and you'll notice a pattern. There's a whole lot of steps that we do all throughout the entire process of this ring to make sure everything's exactly even how we want it. And if you want to see for yourself why this is so important, try making a ring where you don't do all of these steps and you'll definitely see why. So now that we have all of our dimensions accurate using the boring bar, we're okay to switch over to the less accurate Dremel because we've already got it perfectly circular. So the Dremel actually is pretty good at removing material evenly. We just have to make sure our ring is even to begin with, because if you've got a problem, it's not going to make it any better. And again, the reason I use the Dremel instead of just sticking with the lathe bit the whole time is because it's a lot more gentle. And so now that we've got it to the size we need, I'm going to add a little bit more of this thin super glue, and that's for the same exact reason. It's actually able to absorb into the carbon fiber just a little bit, give it a little bit of added strength, and then it actually holds a little bit of a shinier polish, so that makes it look aesthetically pleasing as well. So to get that polish, we're starting with a rough sandpaper, and we're going through all the different grits. I'm starting at 220 to be specific, and then I'm working my way all the way up to about a 1500 grit sandpaper, and then I use 2 different polishing compounds that I've got on this paper towel here. If you're interested, one is a white compound and the other one is a green. So at this point, we have the inside of the ring completely finished, and we've done most of the shaping that we'll need to do, but this video is getting really long, so I'm going to be saving the actual inlaying of the glowstone for a part 2 video. In that video, we'll go over exactly how I do all of the different inlay materials, and this is such an awesome ring for that because it combines 3 different materials. The amethyst is a crystal, and so it's kind of hard to work with. It can be fragile and shatter, and so you need to work around it. That way you can't just trim it with a lathe bit, you need to use abrasives. And then the meteorite pieces, those have their own properties and challenges you have to work with. And then the diamonds especially, those are tricky. So it's a technique that I've developed. I've put a lot of time researching and figuring out the very best way to do that, and I'll show you in great detail exactly how to do that. So let me know what you thought of this first half down in the comments. The second half of this video will come out within a couple of days, so make sure you're subscribed so that you'll see when that comes out. And then as always, if you're interested in making rings, I've got a supplies website, patrickadairSupplies.com, and if you're interested in ordering one of these rings, you can go to my rings website, patrickadairdesigns.com. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday with part 2.